Hi everyone. So the ANC released its manifesto document on Saturday this past weekend. And what I want to do today is to talk about one element of that manifesto, which is its jobs plan. And I think it's important for us to focus on that to be able to assess what are they actually able to deliver, what won't they be able to deliver. Now, I've said this before and I think it's very important for you to remember. Manifestos matter, right? Manifestos matter because they give you an indication of whether the people who you're going to be voting for have a legitimate vision or they don't have a plan whatsoever. Let me give you an example. Donald Trump's manifesto was all of the things that he's currently doing, including trying to build a wall, including banning Muslims, including not limited to all of the things you don't like about what Donald Trump stands for. He stood by those things and is implementing them. That's an example of a politician who stood for something and tried to implement it in their administrative term. But inversely, the ZANU-PF also had a manifesto, and that manifesto did not stand intellectual scrutiny, right? But people were very, very quick to embrace ZANU-PF and Emmerson Mnangagwa, and that's part of the reason now that there's an economic collapse in Zimbabwe, because the media and the international community weren't very robust in critiquing that particular manifesto. So manifestos matter. Manifestos reflect the intellectual strength of particular organizations, and they are quite important for you to see whether or not that organization is going to be able to effect the change that you want. Now, let's talk about the ANC jobs element of the manifesto. I've gone over that. I've gone over the 2014 jobs manifesto. And the first thing that I want to say to you is that the manifesto is very plagiarized. Certain parts of that manifesto are identical. So if you go to page 7 of the manifesto from 2014 or page 20 of the 2019 manifesto, you will find similarities. Here they are. There's a discussion and they use different terminologies, slight, what do they call them? Words that are similar. What do they call these words that are similar? What are they called? Synonyms. There you go. They use synonyms. Sorry, the English escaped there for a second. Synonyms. So here's one. There are 4 big ideas in 2014 and 2019 that they're going to have consolidated industrialization and manufacturing. Number 2, that they're going to have local procurement. Number 3, that they're going to have massive youth employment or youth internships. And number 4, that they're going to have public employment programs. Now, in 2014, that particular manifesto had more courage than it does in 2019. And this is what I mean by this. In 2014, there was actual commitment to how much of a particular thing would they achieve. So number 1, they were specific. They said that they wanted to have 75% of their procurement being local procurement. In 2019, there's no commitment made to a number of how much local procurement the government will actually be making. And that local procurement, by the way, was supposed to be coming from black-owned enterprises and small to medium-scale enterprises primarily. No commitment in 2019 around that particular factor. Furthermore, there was a commitment around the public employment programs. So in 2019, there's no commitment, but in 2014, that's where the famous 6 million comes from. That number comes from the 2014 document where Jacob Zuma and the ANC committed to creating 6 million work opportunities by 2019. Because now we're in 2019, what they've done is they've kept the bullet point, but they've removed the number and the commitment because clearly they failed to deliver 6 million work opportunities by that time, right? The number of actual jobs that are in the country has not actually increased much in the last 10 years or the last 5 years specifically. Stats SA has that data and I'll share that data with you just now. But let's now look at the number that Cyril Ramaphosa runs with. That number that he commits to is 275,000 jobs per year, and this is largely based on the youth employment service that they launched last year. Now, what's interesting is that the people who are in charge of the youth employment service, the co-conveners, are Stephen Kosef, who was the former CEO, he's the former CEO of Investec, and another gentleman called Colin Coleman, who is the CEO of one of the consulting firms in Johannesburg. And what they those two gentlemen were tasked with convening this particular youth employment service. But here's what they had to say about the prospects of succeeding in delivering those jobs. From Stephen Coffey's own mouth to your ears. Take a listen.
But it was at one of the CEO initiative engagements in a feedback session where the then Deputy President said he'd like to create an initiative that creates 500,000 jobs a year. And then Colin Coleman, who's my co-convener, came and he said, "You want to take the ball and run?" And I thought for half a second, I said yes. And then we thought, it was just like matching a job with a corporate. And then we realized that there aren't jobs. Yeah. That these jobs actually have to be created. And so a critical part of YES became, how do you actually create jobs that currently don't exist, or how do you match a training program with jobs that do exist but there aren't the skills to meet those jobs. So, we are quite positive on the potential for YES. I think to get to the 330,000 jobs in year one is a pipe dream. We're already running, I don't know what, probably for me 2 years late, for the president probably 4 or 5 months late, and no fault of, corporates, mainly slowness of government to get the act together, which is part of the challenge, is the capacity of the state. Very clearly we have an economy that is stuck and that there are structural inhibitors. One of the big structural inhibitors is, the education of the workforce. I think Gideon actually mentioned it right up front. Is one of the most terrible legacies of apartheid was Bantu education, and that you have a workforce that, is just not there with the right kind of skills on a broad scale. So I think that we have significant structural issues in our economy, of which education is one, and that is very long term. You're not going to fix it overnight.
Right. So it's clear that it's a pipe dream. The 300 and so something thousand jobs are not going to come. The 275,000 is not going to come in the first 2 years. It's an unattainable goal. So already the ANC is not going to be able to reach its own targets, by the words of the people who Cyril Ramaphosa chose to be the ones who are custodians of that employment service, which is YES. Now, let's actually have a real assessment of the labor situation in South Africa. Here are the numbers. You've got 38 million people who are in the labor sector. Of that 38 million people, here are the numbers. You've got 11 million people employed in the formal sector and 3 million people employed in the informal sector. Those are the numbers. But the real problem comes here. There's a large group of people who are not in employment, education, or training. They call it NEET. N-E-E-T. Not in employment, education, or training. That number is 3.2 million people. And they are between the ages of 15 to 24. They are not in school, they're not in university, they're not in any training whatsoever. They're just chilling, right? 3.2 million people. If we're going to address the unemployment problem, we have to address them. Number two, the biggest people who are suffering from unemployment are people with less than a matric or simply a matric. Those are the largest recipients of the unemployment problem. Those are the largest people who are unemployable in status quo. Any employment intervention needs to target them. And number three, according to Stats SA workforce data from 2018 third quarter, what they actually say is that the manufacturing sector is one of the lowest contributors to the employment data in South Africa. In fact, the manufacturing sector only employs 10.5% of all of the people who are employed in South Africa. And the manufacturing sector has been one of the biggest losers in unemployment. Let me give you the data. Last year, 30,000 jobs were lost in manufacturing. Last year as well, 46,000 jobs were lost in private households. And also 40,000 jobs were lost in mining. So that brings you to a total of 116,000 jobs lost last year in these three sectors alone. In the domestic sector, that's cleaners, gardeners, etc. And then also, you've got manufacturing and mining. Those are the biggest losses. So any plan that seeks to create massive employment in South Africa also has to deal with the biggest losses of employment. Now, the ANC has implemented the minimum wage, and it's possible that the minimum wage is the reason why 46,000 jobs were lost in the household sector, because a lot of people can't afford to pay their maids 3,500. I do want to say before I continue that the ANC has actually succeeded in two things from their 2014 manifesto. Number one, they've been able to implement the minimum wage. That was a 2014 manifesto promise that they actually succeeded in implementing. And two, they were able to curtail unfair labor practices such as labor brokers. Those two things you have to give them credit for, whether you don't like the ANC or not. But when we're assessing the promises of the ANC when it comes to being able to create jobs, we have to actually make an assessment from a problem-solution gap level. The problem, we have massive unemployment. All of their manifestos recognize that. The solution is to create employment interventions, right? That's in the manifesto. But now what you have to consider is, are the interventions proposed by the ANC, consolidated industrialization, local procurement, youth internships, and public employment programs going to achieve that, considering the fact that the current manifesto does not deal with the NEET sector, not employed in education or training. It doesn't deal with the decline in manufacturing. And to deal with the decline in manufacturing, by the way, you have to deal with the automation of the industry, but also the fact that China has basically killed manufacturing in Africa and other third world places. Unless the ANC can outline clearly how they're going to deal with the manufacturing problem, their manifesto as it stands on jobs specifically is ineffective. So if you care about jobs, if you care about employment, if that is something that is going to influence how you vote, I can tell you right now, as it stands, the ANC manifesto is a copy and paste job. It's not creative. It doesn't change from what it's always been saying. But furthermore, one, Stephen Kosef says they can't achieve the targets that Cyril Ramaphosa has put. But further than that and deeper than that, there is a problem-solution gap. They are not targeting the places where jobs are being lost, the places where there is massive opportunity for growth. And as a result, I can tell you in conclusion that there is no prospect of success of the ANC's manifesto when it comes to jobs specifically. That's the situation. That's the bottom line when it comes to that. Oh yeah, I'm done with the manifesto, but I want to just say that the prize for this particular video is going to be this book here. Jordan Peterson, one of the most popular intellectuals in the Western school of thought, very conservative thinker, but an interesting thinker, one of the most controversial, international bestseller, millions of copies sold. If you're interested in winning this book, do comment in the section below. We're limiting the competition to the first 20 people to comment. And what else am I going to say? Yes, the prizes are going to be announced on Twitter tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Comment, like, subscribe, share if you enjoyed the video. Till the next one, peace.